Welcome to the Service Management Leadership Podcast. I have a great guest for you, Jeevan Lobo. Jeevan, how are you today?
Oh, I am great, Jeff. I'm very thankful and excited to be a part of this podcast. I've been listening to a lot of your podcasts. You do a great job out there, and I'm looking forward to having some fun and rock and roll with this podcast, Jeff.
Oh yeah, let's talk shop, huh? So I have been on both sides of the service delivery, model, and you have as well. What are some of the things that either side, either the client or the provider, what are some of the things that they have a major misconception of the other?
Yeah, great question, Jeff. I mean, it's a great question, and that's what a lot of service providers and clients are really, figuring out. It's every time a new challenge. So let me begin with, before I get into the misconceptions, let me begin with every client and vendor are unique. And
Yes.
from my personal experience, I've seen that within an organization, expectation of one stakeholder will be absolutely different from another stakeholder. They are in the
Yes.
same organization, but you look at procurement versus finance and delivery, they all would have different expectations, yet they go through the same contract. So I'd like to start with that. And then I'd like to go with maybe my top three misconceptions. From the client, I'd say, number one misconception from my experience, it's an assumption that service providers may not understand their infrastructure.
Right.
And I say that because some of the comments I hear is the IT service provider quality is inferior to in-house IT. The expectation, they say, okay, the time to take for my problems to be resolved, because from a service provider would be much more, because I know my problems best. How would you know them, right? This is the typical misconception from a client that I've observed. And what I have to say, being on the vendor side, being a managed service provider myself, the with the service provider, you have the experience of working with multiple customers. You have, what do you say, as many skill levels, multiple technologies, multiple tools, and definitely service providers are way well equipped to do the mundane operational, to keep the lights going jobs, aligning to the business requirements and goals. I've seen that, and I feel this is a major misconception. And that's point number one, Jeff. What do you have to say? Do you agree? I see that
I
smile
would
there.
say two things. They judge with a different scale,
Mm-hmm.
internal versus external.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you push it external, you're worried about cost usually. And then
Yeah,
you start pulling out the ruler and saying, okay, you're cheaper, but are you better? And you're like, okay, what's the motivation here? That's number one.
absolutely.
And number two is most of the time when I see that relationship fail, it's because the client side did a poor job of transitioning that environment and equipping their service provider to be successful. I see that every place I've seen the client side, I'm saying it's their fault, has
Mm-hmm.
done a poor job of equipping their service provider to be successful.
Absolutely.
Because here's what happens, Jeevan, and you get me all fired up,
Mm-hmm.
is the client side, they won't tell any of their staff, they won't
Mm-hmm.
build run books, they won't do any of this. And then they announce, hey, we're going to use a service provider. Do you think those employees really want to help that service provider be successful? Usually not.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And so it's the client side, I won't say fault, but they should have been building this knowledge and this run books all along and say, okay, now you have 2 weeks or a month to transition everything that you've worked there 10 years. Now transition it in 2 weeks or a month. Yeah, I just don't. Anyway, sorry, you got me going there, Jeevan.
No, right. That's great. It's always nice to hear views, and I'm very much with you in most of what my points. So, the second one, Jeff, is the misconception that clients have are managed service providers. I'll refer to them as MSPs
Yes.
just as an acronym. They are very expensive, and they charge you a nickel and dime for every service they put in there. I mean, and I'm calling you an in misconception, because the managed service providers, on the other hand, you look at it, they eliminate your risk. from a client side, they invest in the hardware, the software. It can be way too expensive with data centers, private data centers, but you have these service MSPs who would rent them, use dynamically shared resources. They help reduce the overall capex for the client, and they go with a very good transparent pay per usage model, right? So this is a big misconception. The people only equate when the client outsources, they equate bodies, they equate people, they think I'm outsourcing offshore, but they don't get the other hidden aspects of the shared cost and the expertise that the service provider would bring in, that the client would probably not get it at the first point. So this is something that I feel is a big misconception.
And on that note, you also don't have to worry about benefits or somebody, Joe or Susan taking 2 weeks vacation or whatever that is.
Absolutely.
Jeevan, I spent the first 16 years of my career owning an MSP. And so I get that. And the other part is the client still owns some of that responsibility and that risk. And people don't realize you can't outsource your risk. This has to be a partnership in the truest sense. Yeah, and that's kind of what you're talking to. It's got to be a relationship because it's going to have some stress. Every relationship has some stress. And you just have to have that relationship that's strong and trust and alignment and all that stuff to be able to withhold it. Sorry to hijack you there.
No, that's good. I mean, all these points are adding up and, hopefully making our audience understand this topic better. The third one, and I think I'd keep it at 3, is the misconception that clients feel MSPs are less secure.
Right.
And, they speak about security and, there's an assumption made that I give too much control on my off-premise data to an outsourcer. It's usually a threat to your business. I'll say yes, but of course, if it's managed well, when I say managed well, you look at the managed service providers, they have great expertise in disaster recovery, network security, how to ensure high availability bound by data security. So in fact, MSPs do this for a lot of customers and they know better security protocols and procedures, which may be anytime better than our current, say, corporations and government agencies follow. So that I feel is a big misconception, which slowly has to go away from our clients and stakeholder minds. That's what you have to say, Jeff. You had.
I have one for you going backwards. That those contracts are written by 2 people who are equal, and I would say it's false. It's a misconception because the MSP writes hundreds of those a year. The client writes one of them.
Absolutely.
And so there's a mismatch of knowledge and what's needed. Every contract should be, okay, here's what's needed. Here's how much we'll pay. We need these service levels. And they're mismatched because the client didn't divulge everything to the service provider, or the service provider's going just to the letter of the contract. That's why I go back to the relationship piece. It's going to take a relationship to endure, or you're going to keep cycling through service providers. I mean, I see companies that do that every year to, let's go get another one, thinking that it's the service provider's fault, where really it's their lack of knowledge internally.
Absolutely, Jeff. Yeah. I also like to top up, I've seen places wherein customers or clients, you have a lot of churn. You have people, even on the client side, managing new teams or managing contracts. They are clueless about what is there in the contract. They expect vendor X is delivering a solution. They do any and everything under the sun, under the cost of the contract. So, how much does the client know of the contract? How much do they know of the scope is absolutely vital when it comes to, handling service providers or improving the partnership between service providers. Yeah. So I would like to end my 3 top misconceptions with this from the I'll say the client side on the vendors. And I would like to move now to the 3 misconceptions that vendors feel about clients.
Oh, this is good.
This is good because I'm playing devil's advocate, going back to my times. Vendors typically work on the SLA model. I love your recent articles on XLAs, and
Yes.
I'm going to touch that. But what I would like to say is, vendors work on traditional SLA models. They deliver what is there as per the book, and they're not sometimes not even open or flexible to move into or customize, or we speak about the watermelon effect, right?
Yes.
Everything is so good. Everything is so green. We've been consistent for green over the 3 years, but we're not able to figure out that one deep red, which has overall average and make it look so good, but still we are delivering and been with you all for the last 5 years. So I think something which the vendors need to do, they need to have a provision for making your SLAs a little more like XLAs with an added probable cost. Give that little bit of an open, soft spot for customization, which I feel today vendors are pretty close to.
Yes.
Service providers are just not open to doing it, but I think they should make that leeway of having that in their contracts. That would definitely help, Jeff.
And the funny part is you have internal IT who outsources to a service provider, and where the XLAs come in is those two have to team up and say, how is it like consuming our services? What's it like
Absolutely.
from the end user point of view? And that's the part where they really have to have that relationship. And I'll take it a step further. We are entering a time where there's layers and layers of service providers between internal IT and going outward. And to the consumer of those services, it has to be seamless. They do not care who it is or what they may care about what country, but I don't think they care what country is delivering the service. They just want good service. And we're missing in traditional IT, we're missing that point, I think.
Absolutely, Jeff. You made a very valid point. I completely agree with you. The second big point I had, Jeff, is acceptance of a managed service provider. Now, you have a huge client. Not only you have your IT organization, you have your business. And boom, comes in a new service provider. Who plays that? It's just like you have a new member in the family, right? How do you make that family member more accepted is something what a service provider would expect from a client, right? How do they get themselves to be, how can they leverage their contacts within IT or the business, so that they have the so-called OCM, organization change management. How do they implement that to make the service provider successful? Because end of the day, they're helping their own business and IT. Because if they treat them as someone outside, they always get that step something effect, right?
Yes.
Step provider effect, I would say that, right? So I mean, that's this acceptance. And I have got a couple of points which can tag on to that. How can what the clients could help the vendors or service providers would be, how can explain the usefulness and the value, the co-creation that a managed service provider can bring, and how we can together collectively support the business. Another, we speak about big terms like partnership. How do I support the business goals? I think it's all about building that trust early in the game so that you work as a partner, and then the relationship is smooth. So, and I feel that is absolutely vital, Jeff. I
Yes.
hope I see you charged up and happy right now. I think
because I
got
think
your attention out there.
traditional IT blames it on the vendor every time. Like something's broken, and even if it's internal IT's fault, they're like, vendor, it's the vendor's fault. You know what I mean? Like they're the scapegoat for everything.
Absolutely.
And there's no partnership in that. And so you're very knowledgeable with this, Jeevan, very knowledgeable on both sides of the table.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Appreciate it. I think I have another one before we can move to the next question. And that is in terms of the capability of a vendor, right? They should not be, and I have 2 points which I want to cover them together. How could, I think I covered this before. How can IT offer more customization and provide more adaptability to an industry trend? How can I have a model where I can continuously support business expectations. We speak about cloud being scalable, being customizable. Now, how can you have a service model which can adapt continuously? We can vary the factors. Let's go beyond SLA to XLA, or I'm talking about uh, how can we make it flexible for the geography, for the department. For example, there would be some people would still like SharePoint, but some people would go prefer ServiceNow, and some people would like to work with, say, Jira. Do you mean that you have to have a model which adapts to all the three because you're satisfying your end customer, but still giving the flexibility of the models? I think that those type of provisions should be available, not a hardcore, this is the only thing I'm going to do, and that's it, and this is by the SLA. So I'm just trying to summarize maybe the points already covered as to misconceptions as to what could vendors do, service providers do better so that clients can feel that they're a part of the game.
And how most of those contracts are set up, Jeevan, that I've seen, is the managed service provider is basically performing a run or operations role. Mm-hmm. Yet there's always, so let's say they're doing all the Oracle databases. Fine. Mm-hmm. And so now's the time for us to upgrade or patch. And there's this disconnect on whether that's included in the contract. I've seen that a lot of times. Or, hey, we're moving this to the cloud, and the client side hasn't helped the provider understand their Oracle contract. So now their licensing is all messed up, and the vendor gets blamed, where really that blame should be shared. And so, you see all this stuff, and it's a one-side relationship where really all the blame, all the glory should be shared.
Absolutely. Yes, Jeff. Yeah. Yeah. So this, I could go on. This is a very topic close, but I was able to just summarize based on my experience. And these are really good topics. I mean, it's all about relationship, partnership. And this is something which I want to just provide I hope that you found them useful and insightful, Jeff.
It's great because I think every organization has service providers of some type, and they scale up, they scale down, and there's layers of them that most people don't see. That's the piece that we don't understand, because I could use an organization to do all my ServiceNow, MSP, right? But now they're using Splunk or something else, on the event side. So they may sub that part out to a Splunk person, and it has to be seamless to the client side. And there's layers and layers in there that people just don't see from the client side. So let's dive in just a smidge deeper if we can. How can corporations, government agencies, how can they deliver better services? I mean, if we think the focus is on the consumer of the services, and so how can these two sides work together to deliver better services? Both sides meaning client and service provider.
Sure. I'd like to take this as a two-piece question. I'll go with perhaps a very generic model, and then I'll go specific into how government agencies can do that better. So my first thing is corporations and government agencies need to move beyond the WIIFM, what's in it for me model, right? If I only think of myself and have a narrow focus, it's very difficult for me to move beyond what I can actually, the potential I could deliver, right? So move beyond the WIIFM model. There should definitely be a need to make the customers feel more valued. And I say that because, you see a lot of, some of the companies involve pilot customers to engage early. They make them feel part of the entire process, right? You got alpha testers, beta testers for your iPhones and your technology suite products. So if there's a service that perhaps people want to, get consumers more aware of, they need to engage them a little early, receive proactive feedback, make them feel, have a skin in the game, receive proactive feedback, thereby they feel very valued. If customers feel valued, they automatically become partners and they are loyal customers. So that's the second point. With respect to government agencies, I think, again, the thing is, with government agencies, the thought process is ideally, I do not have competition, so I can do the things I need to. I need to be little. I think I would like them to change that mindset to be a little more flexible, agile, think that there is a competition and they need to fight for the best in class as a service, because I won't mention names, but I know when you go to government agencies, they are very used to a model, and they don't think of consumer or customer first, and they give that the priority. So I think that change in mindset is absolutely important. Having expand to a broader thought process. Like, for example, if I look at what I like in corporates, is they prepare budgets for training and development. They prepare, there's so much of training going on. There's so much of BCP, disaster recovery plans, right? I think the government agencies need to do that, especially prepare budgets for training their staff, upskilling with the market. So that's something. And then, of course, one thing which we already spoke about, corporations and government agencies need to move beyond the traditional SLA model and move more into experience level management. And experience level management, what I mean is finding the pulse of the consumers, what do they want, making things more, as at smack level, like social media, having it available, feeling the pulse of what's going on, social engineering, but basically trying to give customers what they want. So I think this is a very high level thought process I had, Jeff, on this question.
So Jeevan, there's two parts there that I want to pile on, if I may. First of all, and I mentioned this earlier, if you are considering moving down that road of using a service provider, you need to develop run books and develop your own internal SLAs and OLAs. Because I think there's a mismatch when we now pay someone else to do something and we expect a higher level service than our internal people did. I see that all the time. And so develop the run books, because what happens when I talked about the churn within service providers, and I mean this with no knock on the service providers, but they're really not going to help the person the company you're replacing them with be successful. And so you went from internal to external to another external, and there's still no body of knowledge internally to help each service provider be successful. That's the first point. The second, you mentioned the experience, and I'm right there with you, because whenever we hold up the SLA like it's a contract, we pull it out and we're looking through the fine print and we're saying we want to hold them to this, I think the relationship's gone, right? Yeah. Like I've been married 20 years, and if I pulled that out and said all of the vows that we did, that we each promised each other, and I said, you promised that you would blah blah blah, I think our marriage would be in trouble. And so that's how I look at this with this experience, is the internal providers, all of the people internal, along with all the external suppliers or vendors or partners, whatever you want to call them, they have to work together and say, how is it from the consumer's view? The service desk always gets blamed, but maybe it's not their fault because we're not equipping them with good knowledge or workarounds or defects that go live. Maybe we're not telling them, and then we blame the service provider. And lastly, on experience, I want to point out that it's experience over the life, it's not customer satisfaction, which is I get a survey every time I call the service desk. Now that's valuable. It's just not the same as experience. Experience is I walk into a restaurant every week for a year. I may value my latest purchase or transaction more than the first, but it's that whole relationship that the experience I care about, because, the person checking me out may have a good day or a bad day. My experience, maybe they call me by name. They're like, hey, there's that tall, ugly guy with glasses. Let's be nice to him. I'm saying, that's what experience is how do we help them consume services better? Sorry, that's my soapbox, Jeevan.
No, absolutely, Jeff. I think I can, I'll resonate with your first point. I've seen that we have, especially when you have major incidents and you've got network outages. I'm happy that I'm talking back in the day in 2018, 2017, when we used to work in office, we used to have we used to have a lot of network outages, and then we used to depend on big companies like AT&Ts and the bigger ones. Now, of course, for us to resolve a problem, you need the SLAs to be tied in together. You spoke OLAs. Now, if you have a 2-day or a next business day with with a service provider, and then you expect your service to be restored, you're doing workarounds. It's defying the purpose of the relationship or the way you want your business to be. So either you screw up at all sides, you tighten up news at all sides, or relax the SLA, make it more realistic, or give exceptions. But yeah, I think you need to look at the whole 9 yards before just making a decision. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, that's why I advise do it internal before you do it external. See how realistic that is. Because if you can't meet that internal, you really can't expect an organization, now that you're pushing on price, them to understand your business better and do it better. I mean, like that, the logic doesn't hold true to me.
Absolutely.
All right. So most corporations are unhappy. Like if you polled people and you said, how do you feel about your service provider, your external service provider? Most of them, all you hear is profanity, right? It's like blah, 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 this, that. So what can the service providers do? You kind of touched on this earlier, do to be better, do better, and be viewed better? I think all right, perception is reality. Let's just say that out front, is how can the service providers help their image from the internal side?
Yeah. See, I would start with, having an alignment in terms of, have alignment between both the sides, come to the table, discuss what's going wrong, why is it going wrong, is this because of a specific tower? Like, for example, you've got Unix or maybe messaging causing a bigger problem, but all the other towers out of the 20 odd are doing great. But are you boiling it down to a specific tower, or is it the overall vendor working relationship? I mean, we need to get into, or is it the recent series of bad experiences, right? It could be a summation of all, or it could just be the perception, as you said. It's very important to understand the business expectations versus the service provider deliverables, and draw back to the contract as your guide, the Bible to refer to. It's very important to do that. So I'll tell you, I've had a lot of experience being in the playing roles of transition, and I would go back to the drawing board and keep the SOW or the contract and refer to them and say, Clause Appendix 1, Clause 1.2 states ABC. This is my responsibility as a service provider. This is yours as a client, and I will not be successful unless you do that. So these type of negotiations, these are soft skills. If you ask, no book is going to teach you this, but getting down to the table, it all boils to communication. The best thing is to speak it out, refer to refer to your contracts, and provide an opportunity for the service provider to explain and set right things before considering an alternate service provider. So for example, right? I mean, I know, for example, you've not yet made the decision, but you're hearing a lot of things. Have a formal agreement, give them a 3-month notice, hear them out and say, okay, let them, you always have to, like in any relationship, you need to have both the parties speak. So hear them out and give them a notice saying, okay, I'll give you 3 months. You get ABC right for me to consider doing stuff. But if I'm not able to get this, boom, I'm going down. I still have the authority by the contract. I can do it. I can move right away if I want to, but I'm giving you that last chance. I think it's good to make some amends before going down. Now, if all this goes down and if it boils down to picking an alternative, I would select a service provider that understands my business. That is key, right? I'm not sure who took the decision at that time. It's already made. But if I have given a chance to rewrite things, I'll look at a provider who's done it before, who understands my business, and who's proven to be knowledgeable. And then I'll ask them, define define my I'll define my problem statements, try to ask them what they can realistically provide to me, and then take it forward. And then if I had to do that again, I'll always choose quality against cost, because cost comes at a price.
Yes.
It's long term. My short term goals would be quality, and if I'm able to get that quality, I can always work on cost later. So this is what I would do, Jeff. And this is all my experience that I'm speaking.
Yeah, I see it as alignment, right? It's all alignment. But then I would also, if I want to take it a step further, if people have been through an outsourcing initiative from the inside, they know how disruptive it is. It doesn't get less disruptive when you switch service providers. When you switch service providers, it's just as disruptive as going initially to an external service provider. So that has to be factored into the equation in the, hey, it's going to be disruptive for about 6 months here. And we have to, that has to be factored into our cost. I don't want to say cost as like dollars and cents cost, but the cost of aggravation and making our consumers of our services happy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can't agree more, Jeff. Definitely.
Yeah, because you can't think it's going to be instantaneous and say, okay, we're just going to switch them out like we are, like we do furniture or something. It's not a lift and shift. It never is.
Yeah.
But at the same point, that's why people that listen to this, I'm a big champion of let's develop our run books, our knowledge. So that way we're equipping the external vendor, external partner for success, but we're also not tied to their knowledge, so that we have it internally and that we can be successful no matter who the provider is.
Absolutely, Jeff. And what I love in the latest ITIL 4, if you might have already observed, is the you have continuous improvement embedded as every part of your practice, every part. So which means you're always thinking how I could do the same thing better. I critique myself at any and every point of time. So you have that built in that model, and I feel this would really incentivize organizations to drive the ITIL 4, because you already have it built in the model. You want your service providers to imbibe that quality, right? In terms of, okay, let me retrospect and see what could I have done better and how can I do better. And that's where you get into automation and all the other things which we all know, the good things we speak about. But yeah, I think that self-reflection, the whole, what I'm happy about is ITIL 4 has that, and maybe organizations will have to adopt to that so that they don't see these service provider challenges. Yeah.
So I appreciate you bringing up service management and ITIL, because it leads me to my next question. Okay. So service delivery has really become SLA enforcement. That's my view. I don't want to project that onto you. And it's moved away from its roots in service management, right? SLA is an ITIL term, and we've moved away from that into this enforcement. What role does service management and ITIL play going forward in that whole outsourcing, using external partners, and all that relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question again, Jeff, right? We're talking about, so let's go back to the 70s and, let's look at how things were done there. 70s, it was mainly, it was only focused on technology. We're not talking about anything. 90s, we spoke about SLAs, and that model is still here. Today, if you look at today's world with the recent COVID and other things, it's all about how well you understand your customers, what models you provide them to improve user experience. And ITIL 4 is so heavy on this. How do you co-create value? It's not just value as an ITIL 3, co-creation, which is value at every point of time. Implement your lean, your DevOps, your SRE and automation, but it's value co-creation at every step, at every point of time. So having said that, these are the 4 things that I want to, that I have an eye out for, I would like audience to keep an eye out for. One is workforce enablement. So workforce enablement is all about improving customer satisfaction with innovative technology. And it's all targeted to fix business problems, right? It's based on that your customers' needs are changing, and They work on the go. They use their own apps. They use their own devices. They require new approach to ITSM, right? You can no longer focus on your traditional SLAs, MTTRs, your watermelon effect. All that goes out of the table. Make sure your customers are happy and they have everything that they can do to make them successful. That's number one. We hear about DevOps, right? So what is DevOps? I want to speak, I'm just giving you not actual DevOps. It's becoming, because, and we are speaking about ITSM here. It's becoming a main movement in ITSM. And how? Because it breaks the silos, right? You have your operations teams and your application teams working in silos, and now you're breaking them. You're trying to get them work together, and it's more like an organization cultural movement. And with DevOps, I've been part of a lot of DevOps teams. I have daily Kanban Scrum meetings. I know if I fail to attend two or three of them, I'm already lost. I mean, it's worse than taking a vacation because so many things happening. You have to be available. You have to be considered. You have to understand how it impacts another business. Why is it so important? What's the downstream, upstream impact, and all that is possible because of DevOps. So it helps increase the deliver, improves the service reliability, increase software delivery. So we can go on and on about this topic. The third big one is shift left.
Mm-hmm.
Shift left is all about moving your, what do you say, right? How do you reduce pressure on your IT department and handle it, give it more to the service desk so that they are able to solve the problems. You're building your, and very particular to your point, SOPs, run books. Why do you want to invest on L3s, L4s to do things which can be done by service desk at a shorter time at a lesser cost? So I think that adds value to the customer in a big way. If you can focus on left shift, you keep that as a principle. It also enables IT to evaluate the redundant activities that can be automated. Either you automate it or you left shift them, but give and it also challenges the technical guys. If you make them do mundane SOP related stuff, they say, hey, I'm a technical guy, I want to do more advanced stuff. What am I doing here, right? So that's another thing. The last point and the fourth point is SRE. And SRE is my current hot topic. I see that it incorporates the aspects of software engineering. Just like the ITIL processes, they are underpinned by automation. So, uh, especially during transition, operation processes, and it's so helpful. I've seen a lot of your podcasts and your blogs. You speak about change, configuration, release. This SRE, while ITIL provides the guidance, this is where SRE can be very useful and involved in. And if you club them together, your CI/CD pipelines with an SRE can be really productive when you're moving to public cloud or moving to OpenShift. So it's really helpful. So yeah, so these are the four top things which I feel which we look forward for. And I wanted to sum this up with saying what I see as the 5 hot trends for ITSM in 2021. I want to, again, and you can feel free to comment. One is the digital transformation. The second is AI, machine learning. There's a lot of automation, which is also picking up. The fourth point for me was people. I would say people because the attitude, the behavior, the culture, it's a mindset change where people have to adopt to what is present today. And the fourth one is, of course, the enterprise service management and ITIL 4, which in combination is going to be like a hot trend. So, yeah, thanks a lot, Jeff. These are some of the points that I had.
So I want to build on one thing you said and go a different way. But I think what you were saying on all of this is that we have to focus on the business outcomes we want to achieve, and then apply the people, the process, the technology, different frameworks, whatever it is, different service providers, whoever they are, to achieve these business outcomes. Everything should be focused on what is it we're trying to achieve. Because we see so much that it's all tool-based or it's too process-based, and we get off track. It's what is it we're trying to achieve? And to me, that is what we have to ask ourselves all the time when we want a new transformation or we want to implement a new framework. It is, what are the outcomes? Because to be honest, the consumers of our services, they don't care if we use SRE or not. They don't care about DevOps. They just want better outcomes quicker. You know what I mean? Like they don't,
Absolutely.
maybe a little cheaper too would be nice, but they
Mhm.
don't really, all this other stuff, we get so bound in IT that we forget what is the business problem we're trying to solve. And that's where I think the service management and ITIL piece should be, and we haven't done a good job over the years. So I admit that, but we should be that anchoring force to say, I get you want to do DevOps and SRE along with our service management. Let's figure out what is the problem we're trying to solve. You know what I mean? Like, I think the service management piece should be that centering thought. What do you think on that?
Oh, absolutely, Jeff. I couldn't agree more. So, you've got ITSM, you have ITIL. Now, IT service management is the core, and you have to implement all these, just like how you have integration for a tool, you need to, ITSM is the core, and you have integration of all this automation, SRE, DevOps, and you had to drive this and make our customers and consumers successful. So I completely agree with you, Jeff.
Yeah, it's how do we enable those outcomes? So Jeevan, you've been a great guest. So those of you listening, Jeevan was one of the reviewers and offered feedback on my book, ITIL Forward, The New Frontier. So Jeevan, last question.
Sure.
You're pretty well-versed. You're well-versed in service management and service delivery. How'd you get into this? How'd you get started in all this world?
Okay. So, so Jeff, I have got I've been in service delivery for close to 18 years. And let me tell you how I started. I was more involved. I started my career with product technical support for reputed Microsoft and the semantic products. And over time, my recent 10 years have been with the IT managed services or service provider delivery sort of an experience. I started with managing a global service desk. I'm talking about 2010. And then I slowly took up more responsibilities, handled infrastructure towers. Then I handled a huge infrastructure managed services client and then took up multiple infrastructure service clients for a vertical. I think 2014, 2015, I had at one point 10, 15 clients. Some of them were small, some were T&M, but yeah, that experience has been huge, speaking to customers, and everyone is so different because, the business model is different. And then during this, I've played various roles. I've had an experience of being a pre-sales. I did some solution architecture, transition, quality. And the turning point was when I gave my ITIL V3 expert. I gave that in 2015. And that has been a real turning point. I've been fascinated by that, specifically because, if you can ask me, I love numbers and the SLA part of it, the process part of it, just got to me. And after being an expert, ITIL V3 expert, I had an opportunity in 2016 to ideally be the champion to implement both ServiceNow and implement process for a customer who were new to the process, to the whole service management. And that has been a fantastic experience because I was there through their journey, right from implementing the process, speaking to stakeholders, improving the maturity of their processes, moving them into digital transformation, even to the extent once they got acquired by another organization, I also helped them, So I was involved in the whole process. And then my last 3 years have been with banking financial clients. Again, I've played roles of cross-functional ITSM role. And, it's so nice because you have to be, what do you say? You're at a tough spot. You have to, especially when it comes to negotiations, contracts, service level managements. You're sitting at a table wherein you have to support your customer, but you still have to, you have to support your service provider, but you have to empathize with your customer, right? So you have those tough conversations. You're leading governance, but yeah, the whole journey has been great. Service management has been very close. I think I'm contacted and connected with you because we share the common passion and interest. And yeah, I'm looking forward to excel and contribute more in this field, Jeff.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast, Jeevan. It's great having you on and you sharing your expertise with us. Do you have any parting words before we go?
Sure, Jeff. First of all, thanks a lot for having me on this podcast. It's really nice. I really feel very privileged, and I'm very happy to be a part of this. I would like to leave with a few words. If you ask me what has changed, I'm giving a summary of what we have spoken. The what and the why of ITSM hasn't changed. It has been the same. I'm talking 2014 till date. But what has changed is the how. The how has to change. And how that how can change is by implementing your agile, lean, DevOps, SRE. So what I'm trying to say is that in principle, we are all trying to support the business. We are using different tools. And there's ITSM is coming up with new ways of thinking. So we got to speed up. We've got to streamline. We have to integrate and automate. So, and another thing, a last parting word is, it isn't so much what ITSM can do, but perhaps what businesses can do with the frameworks that live within the ITSM discipline. So, those are my closing thoughts. And thanks once a lot, Jeff. I thoroughly enjoyed this, conversation with you, and I hope you did too.
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you once again, Jeevan, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Jeff. You have a wonderful day too. Take care.
Bye.